A bank laughed at a 10-year-old boy's crayon map and bought every acre of land around his grandfather's tiny orchard, then spent the next 40 years trying to get rid of him. What they never figured out was that Eli Calloway had been waiting on all of them from the very first day. The call came at 6:14 on a Tuesday morning. Preston Hale had been a land lawyer for 19 years, and he had never once called a client before 7. But his hands were shaking when he dialed, and the coffee on his desk had gone cold without him noticing. The project was frozen. $340 million of permits, grading contracts, and pre-leased retail space, all of it stopped. Not by a judge. Not by a protest. By 4.3 acres of apple orchards sitting dead center in the only road corridor that could connect the development to the state highway. Preston dialed the number on file. It rang twice. An old man answered on the second ring. "Eli," said Preston, "we need to talk about your land." Eli Calloway was 63 years old. He was already awake. He had been awake since 5, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had also gone cold. "I figured," Eli said. "You understand what we're asking. We just need to." Eli set the phone on the table, not to hang up, just to take a slow sip of cold coffee. "Come by Thursday," he said. "I'll have June make lunch." He set the phone down for real and looked out the window at the 47 apple trees that had been in his family since before he was born. The light was thin and gray. The trees stood the same as always. He had known this call was coming for 23 years. Rewind to April 1961. The county auction was held at the fairgrounds. 4 folding tables pushed together, a coffee urn on a card table near the door. Maybe 30 people, most of them there to watch, not bid. Harold Calloway sat in the second row with his hands on his knees. He was 71 years old, and he had turned down 4 purchase offers in the last 18 months. The bank had stopped asking and started buying instead. Every parcel around his land, one after another, until Harold's 4. 3 acres sat surrounded like an island. Harold had brought his grandson. Eli was 10. He had a spiral notebook and a box of crayons, and he had spent the night before drawing every boundary line he knew about the family land. Red for the outer edges, green for the apple rows, brown for the old fence his grandfather had built in 1948. Douglas Fitch arrived last. He was the bank's regional land agent. Blue tie, leather briefcase, the kind of smile that meant he had already won and wanted everyone to know it. He set his briefcase on the front table and looked out at the room. His eyes stopped on Eli's notebook. "Is that a map?" Fitch said. Harold said nothing. Fitch leaned forward a little, squinted. Then he laughed, not a small laugh, the full kind, the kind that fills a room. "Real estate by Crayon," Fitch said. "That's something." A few people in the folding chairs laughed along. The kind of laugh people do when someone with a briefcase sets the tone. Harold did not laugh. He leaned down to Eli's ear. He said one sentence, low enough that only the boy heard it. Eli wrote it in the notebook right then, tore out the page, folded it in half, and tucked it into the front pocket of his coat. Fitch moved through the auction the way a man moves through a room he already owns. He finalized Meridian Agricultural Holdings' purchase of the surrounding 7,500 acres. He signed the papers without reading them closely. He shook 3 hands. Then he picked up his briefcase and walked past Harold Calloway on the way out. "Good luck with your orchard," Fitch said. He didn't stop walking. Harold watched him go. After the room cleared, a county clerk handed Harold a copy of the surrounding deed transfers. Harold folded them into his coat pocket next to his own deed. He did it slowly, like a man putting dishes away. Eli was still at his seat. He was looking at his crayon map, at the brown lines, at the small square in the middle of everything that was still theirs. Harold put a hand on the boy's shoulder. They walked out to the truck together. Neither of them said a word on the drive home. June made supper that night. She was Harold's daughter-in-law. She set 3 plates and did not ask about the auction. She had learned not to ask about things Harold would explain when he was ready. After supper, Harold spread 3 papers across the kitchen table. He looked at them for a long time. Then he looked at Eli. "Keep your map," Harold said. Eli nodded. Harold tapped one of the papers with his finger. Not hard, just once. The way you tap something you want a person to remember. Then he folded all 3 papers back into his coat pocket and went to bed. Eli sat at the table alone. He looked at the crayon map. He looked at the square in the middle. He did not know yet exactly what his grandfather had tapped. But he understood, the way a 10-year-old understands certain things, in his chest before his head, that Douglas Fitch had made a mistake today. A quiet one. The kind that takes a long time to matter. Before this goes any further, hit subscribe, because what Eli finds in that county records room is the kind of thing that keeps lawyers up at night. November 1974. The second table from the window. That was Eli's spot at the Harlan County Public Library every Wednesday afternoon for 14 months straight. Same chair, same stack of county deed indexes. Same cup of coffee from the urn by the front desk that tasted like it had been sitting since morning. Mrs. Fay Pruitt, the librarian, had stopped asking what he was looking for. She just pulled the volumes and left them. Harold Calloway had died in the spring of 1969. He left Eli the 4.3 acres, the 47 apple trees, and a shoebox of papers tied with a piece of kitchen twine. Everyone in the family had looked at the shoebox once and set it aside. Land records, tax receipts, old survey copies, nothing that looked like money. Eli had opened it the night Harold died and had not stopped reading since. The first thing that caught his eye was a single-page state notice, dated March 3, 1956. It was a road abandonment notice for State Route Spur 14B, a planned access road that had been surveyed and partially funded to connect the county highway to the northern edge of what was now Meridian's land. The project had been canceled. That happened sometimes. State money dried up. Plans changed. What did not always happen, what most people never checked, was the reversion language at the bottom of the notice. When a planned road gets canceled, the land that was set aside for it has to go back to someone. In this case, the reversion language was clear. 11 lines of plain legal text. The corridor reverted to the adjacent landowner of record as of the cancellation date. Harold Calloway had owned that adjacent parcel since 1948, which meant the right-of-way corridor, 12 feet wide, running half a mile from the county highway directly to the northern edge of Meridian's 7,500 acres, had quietly, legally, and without anyone noticing, become part of Harold's land in November 1956. 4.5 years before Douglas Fitch bought everything around it. Eli sat with that for 6 months before he touched it. He was careful that way. He cross-checked the 1956 state survey plat against Harold's original 1948 deed at the county recorder's office. He pulled the title chain for the surrounding parcels Meridian had purchased. He found what he expected. The title company that had handled the 1961 transaction had run a standard search. They had pulled deed transfers. They had not pulled abandonment notices. Those were filed in a separate index, a different cabinet, a different room. Nobody had looked in that room. The corridor was 12 feet wide and half a mile long. It was not impressive on paper. It did not look like much. But it was the only flat, legally viable path from the county highway to the north end of Meridian's land. The ridge to the west was too steep for a graded road. The creek corridor to the east crossed 2 private parcels that had never been acquired. The southern end of the property was landlocked by the county fairgrounds. If Meridian ever wanted to build anything large on that land, they needed that 12-foot corridor. And that corridor belonged to Eli Calloway. He drove home on a Wednesday in March of 1975. June had the kettle on. She heard the truck in the driveway and set 2 cups out. Eli came in and spread the papers across the kitchen table. The state notice, the survey plat, Harold's deed, his own hand-drawn copy of the Crayon map, updated now with red pen, every boundary, every parcel number, every owner on record. June looked at the table for a moment. "What is it?" she said. He looked up. "A road that doesn't exist," he said. She looked at the map. She looked at him. "You going to do something about it?" "Not yet," he said. She poured the tea and sat across from him. She did not push. She never pushed. That was the thing about June. She had watched Harold for 20 years, and she understood that patience in that family was not stubbornness. It was preparation. Eli filed a quiet title action at the county clerk's office the following Monday morning. Standard paperwork. 2 pages, $32 in filing fees. The action put his claim to the corridor on public record so that no future buyer could say they hadn't been told. The clerk stamped it without looking up. Over the next 18 months, Eli watched the land. He drove past the north entry every few weeks. He noted when Meridian's survey crews came through, orange flags in the ground, fresh tire tracks in the mud. He noted when a second LLC bought an adjacent parcel in 1976 under a name that didn't say Meridian on the paperwork but matched a registered agent address in the same Nashville office building. He wrote all of it in a green spiral notebook June had bought him for his birthday. He dated every entry. He included parcel numbers. He included the license plates of the survey trucks when he could read them. The notebook filled up slowly, 1 entry per week, sometimes less. In October of 1976, Eli parked at the north end of the corridor and walked the 12-foot strip from the county highway to where it met Meridian's property line. He walked it twice. He counted his steps. He stood at the end and looked south across 7,500 acres of flat, cleared farmland. He looked at the ridge to the west. He looked at the creek bed to the east. He looked at the fairgrounds to the south. He took out the notebook and wrote 4 words, "There is no other way." He closed the notebook. He walked back to his truck, started the engine, and drove home for supper. The trap was set. All he had to do now was wait for them to need it. A knock at the front door, spring of 1979. Eli set his coffee cup on the kitchen table before he answered. He had learned to do that. It kept him from carrying things he didn't need into conversations. The man on the porch was young, clean shoes, a folder under one arm. He introduced himself as Carter, a real estate agent working on behalf of a regional land investment group. He had an easy smile and he used it right away. "I want to be upfront with you," Carter said. "We're prepared to offer $8,000 for the strip, cash, fast close, no fuss." $8,000 was more than most men in Harlan County made in a year. Eli looked at the folder, then at Carter. "I appreciate the trip," Eli said. He shook the man's hand, thanked him for coming by, and closed the door. Carter sat in his car for a minute before he drove away. He filed a report that afternoon. Owner seems simple, doesn't understand the value, may respond to a higher number. Carter was half right. Eli understood the value completely. He just understood it differently than Carter did. Eli mowed the strip twice a year, spring and fall. He used the same push mower for 11 years before the engine finally quit, and he bought a new one. He paid the annual property tax on the strip every April without fail. $9 in 1979, $14 by 1988. The bill was always the first one he paid. He kept the corner markers clear, 4 iron pins, one at each end of the corridor. He walked to each one twice a year to make sure they hadn't shifted or been covered over. The notebook had a full page for each visit. Date, marker condition, any changes to the surrounding land. Most pages were short. April 14, 1981, all 4 pins clear. Meridian grade crew on the south end. New survey flags, blue this time. October 3, 1984, fall mow complete, no visitors, tax receipt filed. June watched him come home from the April visits with mud on his boots and a line of concentration across his forehead that never quite relaxed until he had written in the notebook and closed it. She never asked him to stop. In the summer of 1986, the second offer came. Not a knock at the door. A phone call. A man who identified himself as an economic development officer for Harlan County. His voice had the careful flatness of someone reading from a prepared script. The county had received inquiries about regional development potential, he said. There was interest in acquiring a right-of-way corridor through the north end of the county for infrastructure purposes. They were prepared to offer $47,000 for a willing seller. He used the phrase willing seller 3 times. Eli listened to the whole thing. "I'll think on it," he said. He did not think on it. He called a county title researcher he had used before and asked her to pull every permit application and zoning variance filed for the north end of Harlan County in the last 24 months. There were 11 of them. 8 were under different LLC names. All 8 shared a registered agent. Meridian. The development had grown. It was no longer a farm investment. It was a resort, a wellness campus, golf, a hotel, retail. Something that required a real road. Eli put the researcher's report in a manila folder and set it on the stack that had been building in his desk, the drawer since 1975. The drawer was almost full. That fall, Eli's daughter Clara asked him about the strip. She was 12. She had been riding with him on the October mow, and she watched him walk to each corner pin and press his thumb against the iron before writing in the notebook. "Why do you keep checking those?" she said. "Because they need to stay where they are," he said. She thought about that. What happens if they move? He looked at her. "Someone might think the land moved with them," he said. She wrote that down in her own notebook. She had started carrying one that fall, copying the habit without being asked. Eli noticed. He didn't say anything about it. In the summer of 1994, a man drove up in a rental car. He knocked once, opened the screen door slightly, and introduced himself before Eli had taken 2 steps. His name was Frank Doyle. Senior counsel for Meridian Agricultural Holdings, 3-piece suit, leather briefcase. He set the briefcase on the kitchen table without being invited to and asked if he could sit. Eli gestured at the chair. June poured 2 cups of coffee without asking and left the kitchen. Doyle laid out a number, $310,000. He used the word extraordinary twice and the word final once. Eli looked at the briefcase. He looked at the coffee. He picked up his cup. "I appreciate the offer," he said. "No, thank you." Doyle's jaw tightened just barely. He pushed once more. "Mention the inconvenience of holding a small parcel surrounded by active development. Mention that long-term, the orchard might be difficult to access as construction scaled up." It was not quite a threat. It was designed to feel like one. Eli set his coffee down. "I've accessed it fine for 30 years, he said. Doyle packed up his briefcase and left. That evening, June sat across from Eli at the kitchen table. He kept the notebook open in front of him. He did not write anything yet. "How much longer?" she said. He looked up. "They're about to announce something big," he said. "When they do, Doyle won't be the one who comes back." She nodded once. She turned back to the dishes. She had asked that question before. She already knew what the answer would be. She just wanted him to say it so she could hear that he still knew. In a boardroom in Nashville, a development VP stood at a whiteboard with a red marker, drawing circles around a parcel number. His lawyer was on the phone with a title researcher, asking the same question for the fourth time. Is there any way around the North Corridor? There wasn't. They'd tried 6 different engineering firms. Each one came back with the same report. The ridge was too steep, the Thie Creek required a federal wetland permit that would take 2 years and had a 40% approval rate. The fairgrounds property was county-owned and not for sale at any price the board would approve. The VP capped the red marker. Someone call Calloway, he said. And this time, don't send a lawyer. On a Thursday morning in October of 2002, Eli's phone rang at 7:18 a.m. unknown number, Nashville area code. He looked at it for 2 rings. Then he picked up the receiver, leaned back in his chair, and answered the way he always answered. Calloway, tell me the number, Eli said. The voice on the other end hesitated for exactly 1 second before answering. 1.2 million, clean title transfer. 60-day close. Eli looked at the window, at the 47 apple trees in the early morning light. That's not what I'm selling, he said. The line went quiet. Then the voice said, Mr. Calloway, what is it you want? He picked up his coffee. Let the question sit for a moment. I'll have someone call you, Eli said. He hung up. Then he dialed Clara. Clara Calloway was 31 years old and had been a real estate and property rights attorney in Knoxville for 4 years. She answered on the first ring. She always answered when it was her father. He told her in 3 sentences. She was quiet on the other end for a moment. I'm coming Saturday, she said. Good, he said. Bring your coat. Saturday morning, Clara spread the file across the kitchen table. She had driven the 4 hours from Knoxville with a box of documents on the passenger seat. She set them out in order without being asked. The state abandonment notice from 1956, the quiet title filing from 1975, the 47 consecutive years of property tax receipts, the 11 LLC filings under Meridian's registered agent, and Eli's notebook, all 4 volumes, rubber banded together, every entry dated. She read in silence for 20 minutes. June set a plate of biscuits on the corner of the table without moving any of the papers. Clara turned to the last page of Volume 4, October 2002. All 4 pins clear. Nashville area code called twice this week. Didn't answer. She closed the notebook. Dad, she said. He looked up. They tried to file an abandonment claim on the corridor in 1998. He nodded. Did you know? Found it in the county index in 99. Faye pulled it for me. Clara turned the page of her legal pad and wrote 2 lines. The claim had been filed as a procedural challenge. Meridian's lawyers had argued that, because the strip had not been used as an active road since 1956, it had been effectively abandoned and should revert to Meridian under a dormant easement doctrine. It was a real argument. It had worked in other counties. It would not work here. Because Harlan County had taxed the parcel every single year since 1940. 63 consecutive years of tax bills, each one paid, each one in a Calloway name. Under Tennessee property law, continuous taxation by the county was one of the clearest possible indicators that a parcel had never been abandoned by the government's own record. Meridian's lawyers had made a mistake. They had argued abandonment, while the county itself kept sending the bill. Clara made the call to Doyle's office at 10:30 that morning. She did not introduce herself as Eli's daughter first. She introduced herself as counsel of record for the Calloway family land interest. The tone on the other end shifted immediately. She told them the family was prepared to be heard at the Harlan County hearing on the abandonment claim, which was scheduled for the following Thursday. She listed the 3 documents she would present. She told them what conclusion the hearing officer would reach, stated it plainly, and did not embellish. Then she asked if Meridian wanted to discuss an alternative arrangement before Thursday. Doyle called back in 40 minutes. The hearing was brief. Clara set 3 documents on the table in front of the hearing officer. The 1956 abandonment notice with the reversion clause. The 1975 quiet title filing, 63 years of county tax receipts, stacked flat, held together with a binder clip. Meridian's lawyer presented their dormant easement argument. The hearing officer reviewed the tax records for 90 seconds. He looked at Meridian's lawyer. The county tax parcel every year since 1940, he said. That's not abandonment. That's ownership. He ruled for Calloway. The whole thing took 11 minutes. Meridian's lawyer reached for his phone before he was out of the building. The negotiation lasted 3 days. Doyle pushed for a lump sum, $2 million, then $2.4, then a final offer of $2.8. Each time, Clara said no on behalf of her father. Each time, Doyle's voice got a fraction tighter. The terms Eli wanted were simple, and they did not change. A permanent access easement over the 4.3-acre corridor. Monthly payment of $4,200. Beginning the first of the following month. Adjusted for inflation every 3 years. Secured against the Meridian property itself so that any future buyer would inherit the obligation. Transferable to Eli's heirs in perpetuity. Not a sale. Never a sale. Doyle's lawyer pushed back on the inflation clause. Clara said it was non-negotiable. Doyle's lawyer pushed back on the perpetuity language. Clara said the same thing. On the third afternoon, Doyle accepted every term. Clara called her father at 4:47 p.m. He answered on the second ring. They signed, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said. He thanked her. Hung up. Then he walked into the kitchen and told June in 4 words. Clara got it done. June turned from the counter. She looked at him for a moment. Then she turned back and put the kettle on. That was enough. The signing happened at the Harlan County Clerk's office on a Wednesday afternoon. 3 copies. Each one notarized. The clerk's name was Donna, and she had worked that office for 22 years, and she did not recognize Eli until halfway through the signing. Weren't you Harold Calloway's grandson, she said. Eli signed the last page. Still am, he said. He walked to his truck alone, sat in the driver's seat, opened the notebook, the 4th volume, the last pages, found the next blank line. He wrote the date, then one sentence. Easement signed. $4,200 due the first of every month. 47 trees still standing. He closed the notebook, set it on the passenger seat. A week later, the agreement ran in the Harlan County Gazette, 3 paragraphs on the local business page. No photo, just the terms and the parties. Douglas Fitch, retired now, living outside Knoxville, read it over his coffee and said nothing. The 4 people who had laughed at the auction in 1961 were no longer laughing. 3 of them were no longer alive. The 4th read the Gazette piece twice and put it down without a word. The monthly check arrived on March 1st as scheduled, and every month after. Some men spent 40 years trying to own what a family refused to sell. Eli Calloway spent 40 years just making sure they couldn't. Before you go, would you have taken the $2.8 million lump sum or held out for the monthly deal that pays forever? Drop your answer below. And if you made it this far, you already know what to do.